This episode was made possible thanks to generous supporters on Patreon. Good day everybody and welcome to the brand new YouTube series dedicated to your questions and my answers. I decided to call it Asking Alexandra because it's funny. I will start this first episode with questions from my Patreon supporters, and if you like what I do, you can become my Patreon supporter too by visiting this link up here or down in the description. So the first question is, what are the specific challenges of writing a concept album and how does having a concept inform the way you compose your music? Well, writing a concept album is definitely a different sort of task compared to a regular album, because a regular album is pretty much a collection of songs, while the concept album is like one giant song. And you need to approach it in a completely different way, because you need to, of course, to have the concept first, and then you need to start writing different themes because they will appear as reprises here and there. There will be some variations, there will be reoccurring themes depending on the concept, and basically you need to start writing all of the tracks of the album simultaneously and just you finish them on the go until it's one full finished product, just like you would approach a single song. You don't write the intro and then you finish the intro and say, okay, this is right, then we move to the verse, and then you work only on the verse and then only on the chorus and so forth. You write the song from the beginning till the end and you work on all the parts simultaneously. So it's just a different scale. The same principle applies to writing a concept album. Okay, talk about how you write music, or talk about how you came up with the theme on any of your pieces. I'll leave it up to you as to what song or songs you would talk about. So the way I compose music is pretty much by translating an idea that pops up in my mind into the guitar or the piano or whatever other instruments I think it's appropriate. And thanks to my musical education and experience, these musical themes, they usually pop up with a chord progression and certain textures, so I can immediately figure out what I'm looking for. For example, a theme pops up with certain type of sound and I know what kind of instrument will be appropriate for this theme. And the same goes for the background, the chords, the beat and the groove and everything. It just appears almost cooked, and I just need to translate it on the instruments as soon as possible before it runs away. A very good example of such theme is The Seducer's Diary, which is from my first album, 9 Stories, which I released back in 2014. And this was the first theme that I composed for this album. And it was during a rehearsal with a band, and I was just jamming something, and suddenly this main theme that the song starts with, it just popped up in my mind immediately together with the chord progression, and I just started playing it, and I like it so much that I decided that I will just develop it and make a full song of it. And it was probably a week after that when I already had a full song, and I needed just to polish some details and do the recording properly. Hi Alexandra, how about your top 5 list of guitarists that influenced your playing while you were becoming the guitarist you are today? Well, this is one of the most difficult questions ever, because I could never narrow them down to just 5. Probably I could narrow them to just 5 for a certain period of time, because usually my influences fluctuate during time, and I'm moving in waves. And for example, several years I'm obsessed with 2 or 3 bands and artists, and I listen only to them. I study their music, their approach to the instrument, to their compositions, and I learned riffs, solos, and everything. And then gradually I moved to a next wave where I'm interested in slightly different artists and bands. So most of the time I gravitate around several names, and they are Jason Becker, Marty Friedman, Steve Vai, Yngwie Malmsteen, Joe Satriani, and Tony McAlpine. 6. Okay, but just no matter what I do, I always come back to these few artists, and I could say that they influenced me the most. Would be cool to talk about gear guys versus songwriters. Everybody wants to own a guitar like Slash, but nobody seems to want to write a song like Bohemian Rhapsody. Does gear even matter? Or do you know on which piano Freddie composed Bohemian Rhapsody? I know for the recording he used the same piano as Let It Be, but just because recording studios don't have 500 pianos. Well, this is an interesting question. I see that nowadays there's a tendency of focusing too much on gear, and probably this is because just that the market is oversaturated with all kinds of gears and gadgets and instruments and different brands, and basically you get overwhelmed by different tools that you can express your creativity. Well, when I was starting, the choice was very, very limited, and probably the same applies to the music that's being composed earlier, like in the 70s or 80s or earlier, because the choice of instruments wasn't so wide. For example, when I started playing, I had this guitar. This is my first electric guitar. It looks terrible now, and it doesn't have frets because I made it fretless some time ago. And this guitar is very, very difficult to play. You can see that the neck is not exactly thin, and strings were almost 1 centimeter high above 12th fret. So I was trying to play Yngwie Malmsteen on this guitar, and this was everything that I've got back then. And I just learned to utilize this instrument as much as I could. And I wasn't spoiled by instruments. So my playing skills and composing skills developed in a completely different way. And even I started playing piano not on actual piano, but I started on a wooden board with drum keys, and I made this for myself because we couldn't afford piano, and I really wanted to play. So I took this wooden board and I drew the keys, and I put the note letters on top, and I started playing like that, and I was just imagining the sound. And of course, this was very beneficial to my development as a musician, but I think that the important thing is to find the proper balance, because if you're deprived of tools to express your creativity, it's also not good. Just like if I would have to be stuck with this guitar for my whole life, I wouldn't be able to do the music that I'm currently able to do, and this is because I have gear at my disposal. And the same would be for every kind of art, but yeah, the important thing is balance. How about how old you were when you started playing? Was the guitar your first instrument or piano? If you could spend the day with any composer, dead or alive, who would it be? Well, I started with a guitar, and it was classical guitar when I started. I was 7, almost 8 years old, and I played a couple of years on classical guitar, and then I moved to electric. And I had a teacher who introduced me to all of these guitar players that later became my main influences. And during that period, I was very impressed by mostly Brian May and Mark Knopfler, because these were the prominent guitar players of the music that surrounded my childhood. And then I watched this expo in Sevilla in '92, and then I saw Steve Vai and Joe Satriani together with Brian May on the same stage, and my jaw was like down on the floor, and I was super impressed by these guys. And this is how I started developing really serious interest to electric guitar. And later my teacher introduced me to Jason Becker and Tony McAlpine and all other guys, and this is how it all started. And Tony McAlpine also was one of the reasons I started playing the piano as well, and he still influences me a lot when it comes to these abilities. And he's also the reason why on every album I play there is something that's more piano-oriented piece, and I plan to continue this tradition because it's important to me. And later in my life I started playing bass. I took some drums lessons. I basically tried every possible instrument that I could lay my hands on, and this is how I played saxophone, violin, and trumpet, and banjo, steel guitar. This is how I started playing the mandolin, and later I started playing the flute. And I think it's very beneficial for musicianship to have all these kinds of musical experiences. Regarding the composer, probably it would be J.S.Bach, because I think he's just a great musical mind, and every time I listen to his works I'm just blown away how brilliantly all the voices are intertwined, and how the whole composition is made in such an ingenious way. So the way he operates with music is just spectacular, and I just want to have the chance to speak with such musical mind and to see how he thinks about everything. So yeah, probably Bach is the choice. So that was the last question for this episode. If you want your questions to be answered by me, write them down in the comment section, and consider supporting me on Patreon up here and on the links down in the description. Click like, subscribe to my channel, click the bell button to get informed every time when I upload new video. See you next time and have a spectacular day.